Hello investigators and welcome to Until the End of Time. My name is Werner and I hope you're having a great day today. In this video I will be talking about one of the upcoming investigators from the Edge of the Earth expansion, Chen, the martial artist. I hope to do similar videos for all the other investigators in that box. Before I start, I do want to just quickly mention that the Edge of the Earth player cards are not previewed yet. In fact, at time of recording, we only have about 30 cards from the entire box and they're expected to be over 200 cards in there. A reasonable chance exists that there are going to be some cards in the expansion that drastically change how we perceive these investigators. Even something like the catalog that was previewed in the stream recently changes how we see Economy and Bob, and if you haven't seen that card, go back and watch my stream recap video. What I'm trying to say here is that there may be previews, or just when we get the box, we may get cards that change how we would approach these archetypes or approach these investigators. And when that happens, don't go, well, Werner's an idiot. No, I'm not psychic, sadly. So keep that in mind. We don't have a full picture of how these investigators are going to look when they're actually released. I also just want to mention that in general, I want to encourage exploration and kind of deck diversity. I don't want to make it sound like these are the archetypes you can play with this investigator and trying to do anything else is just stupid. No, of course not. Please experiment. Please try stuff. This is supposed to be a starting off point. If you are, worried about deck building, if you're not the most confident and comfortable with it, these are maybe some deck archetypes that can help you get started and give you an idea of what kind of character Lily is and in what kind of group she would perform well. Now then, let's talk about Chen, the martial artist. She is a mystic. She has 3 willpower, 2 intellect, 4 combat, and 3 agility. She's chosen and warden traded, which so far I don't think do anything special. She begins the game with each of her discipline in her deck in play, unbroken side face up, and an Elder Sign effect +2. After this test ends, flip a broken discipline you control to its unbroken side. She has 7 health and 7 sanity. Now, if you've seen my previous announcement article videos and stream recap videos, you will have already seen these disciplines, but for the people who haven't, let's go over them really quickly. So you start each campaign with a single discipline of your choice, and every 15 XP you earn, you can add an additional discipline. If you do, you also have to add another copy of her weakness. Each discipline gives +1 to a specific stat and has a corresponding action ability that breaks the discipline, losing the stat boost in the process, but gives you a powerful ability, and then you can flip them back over to their unbroken side based on either an ability on the back side of the card or using Lily's Elder Sign. And so going hopefully a little quick, we have the Alignment of Spirit, which gives +1 willpower, and you can take a direct damage to heal 3 horror, or take a direct horror to heal 3 damage. Then you have to flip it over. And on the back side, after the round ends, if you took no damage or horror the entire round, flip it back over to its unbroken side. This is nice. As a mystic, Lily might want to have 4 willpower to at least be able to spellcast reasonably well. And the healing is actually pretty decent. It's a little weird, but you do definitely have some scenarios where you get either a lot of damage or a lot of horror. And in those scenarios, the ability to shift it from one side to the other, could just save your life. This is also, I think, one of the easiest ones to flip back over. Taking no damage or no horror, it's kind of something you want to do anyway. And there are cards like Deny Existence that can help you do that. Play it safe for a round and you get this thing back. The Quintessence of Thought is the intellect one. This is a very important one, I think, for solo or low player count. Gives +1 intellect, and then if you have fewer than 5 cards in hand, you can draw cards until there are 5 in your hand, flipping this asset over. And then at the round ends, if your hand did not have 2 or more cards in it at any point in this round, flip it over to its unbroken side. So this is a very powerful ability, right? 5 cards, potentially, if you have no cards in hand, is really strong for a single action, but flipping it back over is going to be difficult, right? You have to have no cards or 1 card in hand for the entire round. That includes upkeep, so your upkeep draw needs to not disrupt this as well. I think it's doable. I think it's going to be tricky. I think that for solo, the ability to just have a big draw 5 when you need it could be really strong. Prescience of Fate, the combat one, action to get +5 skill value for the next skill test you perform this turn. After the skill test ends, flip it over, so nicely you still get the +1 combat on that next test. And this action does not provoke attacks opportunity. Reaction after the round ends, if you perform no skill test this round, flip it over. So this is one of the trickier ones. I think +1 combat is kind of in line with what Lily wants to do, because she's then starting with 5 combat and she's fighting people. The action ability is interesting because you have to activate this action and then presumably whatever action you are actually testing. So this is kind of a slower way of doing things, but it's pretty powerful. Like, +5 skill value should not be, dismissed. That's a lot. But on the other hand, it's not easy to flip back. You often will have to test a Mythos, and even if you don't, you don't have to not have to deal with any enemies or do anything really that requires a skill test, which seems tricky. I think this is one that the Elder Sign is going to flip back more often than not. I'm also not, confident that I wouldn't just rather have +1 combat and kind of let that ability sit there. But maybe if you're playing something like solo and you have to take a test that you're just not able to do otherwise, there are worse strategies. Finally, balance body. You get +1 agility, 1 at a time, take up to 3 different fight or evade actions, and those have to be different. So they can't just be a basic, you have to use your assets or your events. Flip this asset over, and this action on the discipline does not provoke attacks of opportunity. And then a reaction after the round ends if no enemies were at the same location as you at any point this round. Flip this asset over to its unbroken side. I think this one's interesting because you don't have a lot of control over that. If you draw an enemy in Mythos, it just has to happen. But otherwise, I think it's pretty doable to keep that under control. And the ability is actually quite strong, right? Like 2 bonus actions, basically taking 3 actions for the price of 1. You need to set that up. You need to have ways of doing different actions, but there are ways of doing that, and it is really good for factions that don't necessarily always get more bonus actions. Then we have the Burden of Destiny. So we get up to 4 copies of these, depending on how many disciplines we have in our deck, and they each read Revelation. You must either choose one, flip a discipline you control to its broken side, cannot flip back this round, or take a damage and a horror. I think which option you pick very much depends on which disciplines you have. As we already mentioned, there's a couple that are a little easier to flip back than others. I can imagine, for example, the Willpower discipline being the one you usually flip down, and then you flip it back up pretty quickly afterwards. 1 damage and 1 horror is not the worst either, as far as weaknesses are concerned, but the fact that you are getting potentially 4 of these is somewhat worrying, if only for the fact that you're going to be kind of wasting 4 draws. Keep that in mind, right? Each one of these you draw is another card you did not draw. So you don't want to, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that perhaps you don't pick your 4th discipline if you feel like you don't need it. You just go, well, no, I have 3. I don't need to draw anymore, and I'd rather not get that extra weakness, because it is optional. And then finally, we have our deck building. Deck size of 30. Deck building options, Mystic cards 0, Guardian cards level 1 to 5, Neutral cards 0 to 5, and up to 5 other Guardian cards level 0. This is the deck building style that we've seen with Norman, and we are reasonably confident will be for every investigator in Edge of the Earth. We've seen it for every one of them except for Daniela, and it sounded like there's definitely going to be all 5 of them. Plus, they already talked about it in the FAQ recently. For multi-class cards. You can look it up. It's a small thing. Regardless, this means that Lily Chen starts out as a full-on Mystic and then levels up into Guardian access, which is a interesting change. It's going to be curious to see how she actually that influences her archetypes, which we'll be getting into momentarily. But we have a couple more deck building requirements. We have 1 Burden of Destiny for each discipline asset we have, and a random basic weakness, as always. She also cannot take any firearm assets, because she didn't have enough going on yet. And then this additional requirement, which is basically the discipline rule. So you add 1 discipline to your deck at deck creation, and then every 15 experience you've earned, you may choose and add a different discipline asset to your deck. Now, I don't actually know if that means that she can take additional disciplines in standalone. I would assume it does. Like, right, for every 15 XP you get to just add another discipline as well. I would certainly rule it that way, but we haven't actually had confirmation about that. Alright, so now that we have the full picture of who Lily Chen is and what she does, let's talk about, well, what can we do with her? And I'm just going to be going through a couple of archetypes that I think make sense to consider when talking about her, some kind of fun stuff, and maybe some good ways to try her out and before going off and doing completely crazy stuff. And starting off, we just have the Monster Slayer archetype. This is a pretty classic Guardian archetype, and I think it fits Lily quite well. Because with the right discipline, she can start the campaign with 5 combat, which is a lot, and she has access to upgraded Guardian cards. Now, Lily doesn't have access to any firearms, which means that Flamethrower, Lightning Gun, even the humble 45 automatic, are out of her reach, but Time War Brand, Enchanted Blades, Butterfly Swords, which are coming in the expansion, are still plenty fine weapons, and I'm assuming she's going to be using some of them. There's also, some Mystic cards she could be using. Plus, I like the idea of Lily maybe compensating for her lack of guns by, her martial arts, like, say, the Sweeping Kick, that's also coming in the Edge of the Earth. And when all else fails, a Vicious Blow usually gets the job done as well. This is a pretty straightforward archetype, and honestly, it's just kind of the classic Guardian Seeker pairing. You get Lily, you get somebody who's good at getting clues. Lily deals with all the enemies, and the other person deals with all the clues. And you're having yourself a grand old time. Next, this is less of an archetype, but I just wanted to talk about Lily solo. Lily's not exactly the easiest investigator to play solo, but I don't think she's impossible to solo either. Plus, I already talked about it on Reddit a little bit, so I decided, why not at least share my thoughts here. The intellect discipline gives you 3 intellect to start out with, which doesn't sound like that much, but it's probably actually very good. Plus, the ability on the quintessence of thought, that's a difficult word, is very powerful for solo. This like one-time insertion of a lot of cards that help you hopefully keep up tempo and get through the scenario. After that, the combat discipline lets you take any test you need to do, +5 skill value. Sometimes in solo you end up across a scenario card that just needs you to take some kind of random skill test, and you just need to do it, right? Whether it's a treachery that you just have to clear, or some kind of act card that needs a willpower or agility test. Like, it's great to have +5 there. I do want to warn people about playing too much setup heavy cards in solo, especially with her Mystic and Guardian access. It's very easy to fall into the trap of just, let's play all the spells and let's play all the big weapons and the allies. It's like you don't have enough money for that and enough time to get set up. Rely on cards like Flashlight for clues, because they only get 1 clue at a location, rather than the Drawn to the Flame or Rite of Seeking, which usually get multiple clues. And run additional skill cards, Perception, Promise of Power, to try and, kind of stay ahead of the curve. It's very easy in solo to fall behind and get kind of dragged under. Some of the Mystic spell cards as well can really help. Spectral Razor and Ethereal Form let you evade and fight without having to play any assets, which helps not slow down too much. I think Lily is going to be interesting to solo. I think she's definitely viable. I think, she's not a bad one for solo for sure. I think she's going to be tricky, but seems like fun. One archetype that I've been really, it's been really on my mind because Instrument did just come out is Bless and Curse, and for Lily that's probably going to be Bless, given how she upgrades into Guardian. Now, because of her whole deck building, she's actually kind of restricted on her ability to generate Bless tokens. She does have a couple of tricks, and one of my favorite ones here is Tides of Fate with Tempt Fate. So Tempt Fate is this neutral card. You add 3 curse tokens to the bag, and then you add 3 bless tokens to the bag, and you draw a card. And then Tides of Fate is this mystic event that replaces all the curses in the bag with an equal number of bless, and then at the end of the round replaces all the bless in the bag with an equal number of curses. So what you can do is replace all the curses from the Tempt Fate with blesses. So you play Tempt Fate, you add 3 bless and 3 curse. You play Tides of Fate, now you have 6 bless in the bag, and then you play, say, Rite of Sanctification, which seals up to 5 blesses. The blesses that are sealed on Rite of Sanctification are not in the bag, and so they don't get replaced by the Tides of Fate back into curses. This is kind of shenanigans, but on the other hand, 2 of the cards are fast, one of them also draws you a card. It's weird, but I think it actually could work. She does have some access to generation at Guardian XP as well. Holy Rosary, of course, just gets the job done. That card's actually been really impressive for me. Just passing a couple of willpower treacheries here and there and just stuff the bag full of bless tokens. As far as generation, you probably want to have a teammate that can help you, but as far as payoffs go, she's actually kind of set. So we have basically all the good Guardian Bless payoffs here. We have Holy Spear and Radiant Smite, which are weapons or events that can deal a lot of damage with Bless tokens. We have Nephthys, which is a ally that cares about Bless tokens, either saving them from kind of being turned or being removed from the chaos bag, or turning them into extra damage. Something like Hallow is really strong. You have to spend basically 10 Bless tokens, but then you get to remove a Doom from any card in play. This is also a fun shenanigans one with the Tides of Fate I just mentioned. Put 10 curses in the bag, then Hallow, then remove all of them then Tides of Fate and then Hallow. So you get to remove all your curses, and then when it tries to turn them back into curses, they're just not in the bag anymore. And finally, I did want to mention Blessing of Isis, which lets you use 2 blesses as an Elder Sign instead. Lilith Elder Sign can be very powerful based on which disciplines he's running, so that may be a very interesting strategy, and I'm kind of interested to see what people try with this. Like all Blessing Curse strategies, it works better in a complementary team, right? You want to have a team that also generates some Bless tokens if you want to run this archetype. Next up, we have the Spellcaster archetype, which is kind of tricky because she doesn't get access to any XP Mystic cards. So you only get the level 0 spells. I've picked Azure Flame and Weather Seeking as examples here, but there's a suite or two available for sure. She does have access to Arcane Initiate, which is nice. That's, I think, a big help for the fact that she can run this. And it's worth looking at the Guardian pool and seeing which cards can boost your willpower, because usually upgraded Mystic spells provide additional willpower boosts. And she does only start with 3 willpower, although you probably take the willpower discipline 4. You're gonna want to have some willpower boosts, but cards like Police Badge and Brother Xavier definitely get the job done. There's even Physical Training, which is a talent that you can spend money with. She can take level 4 Physical Training as a way to constantly be boosting her own willpower. Finally, I did mention the Dragon Pole, which is a card from the upcoming Edge of the Earth expansion, and I kind of made it entirely its own archetype. It's on the left here. The 3 cost 0 XP Mystic asset, Dragon Pole, combat icon, takes up 2 hand slots, gives you an additional arcane slot, and then an action to fight, +1 combat for each arcane slot that is filled. And if at least 2 of your arcane slots are filled, this attack deals +1 damage. If you have 2 arcane slots, this becomes action fight, +2 combat, +1 damage, which is really good, right? At level 0, those numbers, and no exhausting, no limited uses, no limited ammo, that's just really strong. That's really strong. So having this card in play is going to be difficult. I think it is much harder to set up than it might appear, and that's kind of why, despite Alchemical Transportation and Scrying not exactly being my favorite cards, I still include them here, because I think you just need cheap spells to get set up as fast as possible. Now, a card like Ever Vigilant probably goes in most of these archetypes because it's just nice to speed up your setup, but for this one in particular, imagine being able to go Ever Vigilant to put down a Dragon Pole, Alchemical Transportation, and Scrying for a total of 2 resources, and now your Dragon Pole is just going. I mean, that sounds pretty good to me. Plus, you do get the extra Arcane slot, so you can play these 2 and then maybe play either an Investigate spell or a evasion spell. You probably don't want another combat spell because your hope is that once you've got the Dragon Pole going, you don't need to use Shriveling or Azure Flame to deal damage. You've got the Dragon Pole for that. Plus, Guardian does give some combat boosts. Beat Cop is a classic example, and probably pretty nice if you want to be kind of doing this Monster Slayer, but without using Guardian weapons or without using high XP weapons. This is I think a fun archetype, but this is definitely one where we're hoping, at least I'm hoping, that the Edge of the Earth will have a few more spells that Lily really wants to run, just so she can fill those arcane slots a little bit easier and with slightly better cards, because, let's face it, Scrying and Alchemical Transportation, not exactly the cream of the crop. And then finally an archetype that I jokingly refer to as Nachos, of course in honor of Nathaniel Cho, the boxer, which is a fighting boxing gloves kind of archetype. You have fight events, you have spirit events specifically, because those are the ones that boxing gloves can get. But it's tricky on Lily. I think it's good. I think you can make it work, and she has, like, Sweeping Kick is one of the new cards that she definitely wants to run and is good in her, and you can get with the boxing gloves because they are spirit rated. But you need a lot of Guardian events to make this work, and you basically need them all to be XP because you can't include more than 5 at level 0. As such, I would recommend running this kind of archetype maybe in a standalone deck or in a campaign like Dream Eaters, where after the first scenario you immediately get a bunch of XP. The only other thing that I really want to mention here is that in addition to your standard fight events like Sweeping Kick and Counter Punch or 1-2 Punch, yes. There's also kind of supporting events like Stand Together, but there's also stuff like Word of Protection. Now, currently there's not a lot of Spirit cards in Mystic that you'd want to pick up, but there might be more. We haven't seen Edge of the Earth completely yet. And finally, well, I guess that's kind of it, so I'll be wrapping up here. I hope you enjoyed these archetypes. Let me know if there's anything that I missed, please, I'm always curious, and I've honestly just been kind of looking around the community, seeing what people came up with, seeing what cards excited me, but there might be cards that I completely missed on and that you are super excited about. I think Lily will be one of the more complicated investigators released. In fact, I feel like outside of the parallel investigator, she's probably the most complicated investigator. She has 4 different signature cards, and you get to pick and choose which one you want to include. She has this curious deck building with additional restrictions, but she also seems like she'll be a lot of fun to play. And there's a lot more emphasis on kind of making her your own investigator, figuring out what you want to be doing with her, and how she and the group you're playing with kind of influence how you're playing her, which I really like. It's going to be complicated, but it'll be very fun, I think, once you get her going and once she does what you want her to do. So that's kind of it. Thank you so much for watching, and look forward to more videos coming soon. I'll be seeing you until the end of time.